make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they were a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
Candidates up front. This series of interviews with candidates in the November 3rd general election is brought to you by Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Both organizations are nonpartisan. That means we never support candidates nor political parties. But both organizations consider it their mission to provide voters with information about each election. I'm Judith Cranus, a member of the League. First, if you are not yet registered to vote, go to votespa.com to register. Votespa.com is in English and Spanish, and while you have until October 19th to register, the smart thing, do it now. And if you do not want to stand in line on Election Day, apply for a mail-in ballot. Again, go to votespa.com. Do it now. And when your ballot arrives, get the information you need on the candidates, watching programs like this or going to their websites, to make your decision, then mail that ballot in right away. We help our Berks County Elections Office handle this election smoothly if we are timely. And if you choose to go to your polling place on Election Day, polls are open from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. This year, we will vote for Pennsylvania Attorney General, Auditor General, and Treasurer. We will also elect representatives to the U.S. Congress, to the Pennsylvania Senate, and the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. The League and BCTV invited all but the statewide candidates to be interviewed. Some did not reply, some declined. Those who agreed will be asked the same questions in the same order with the same time limits as others running for the same office. These interviews will be available on BCTV's webpage and YouTube channel. If you watch the interviews of two candidates running for the same office, you can compare their answers to make your decision on how you will vote. This interview is for United States Representative in Congress in the 4th District, and we do have a map for you. There we go. This district is Eastern Berks County. Congress is the legislative branch of our national government. It has two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Representatives serve a 2-year term. They propose and pass federal laws. The number of voting representatives in the House is fixed by law at no more than 435, proportionally representing the population of the 50 states. Pennsylvania currently has 18 representatives. The salary for a U.S. representative is $174,000 plus benefits and expenses. The two candidates for the 4th District are Madeline Dean, the Democrat, and Kathy Barnett, the Republican. This interview is with Madeline Dean. She is the incumbent, and she is joining us via Zoom as she is in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Mrs. Dean.
Oh, well, thank you, Judith. Thank you to you and to the League of Berks County. I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, please tell us why you want to serve in Congress and what your qualifications are for this position.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the time to be with you. And I want to mark this 100th anniversary of the work of the League of Women Voters. It's a very exciting, historic year. I hope that what people see in me is someone who prizes public service. I've lived in Montgomery County my entire life, but for some schooling outside of Montgomery County. And it is an extraordinary honor to represent the 4th Congressional District, which is most of Montgomery County and an important part of Berks County, the eastern part of Berks County. I hope my qualifications as a mother, a grandmother, trained as a lawyer, a former professor, and someone who served in the Pennsylvania House for 6.5 years are part of my qualifications. I hope the other part of my qualifications is my passion for public service, my passion for making a difference, for making sure that each of my constituents is represented fully and fairly. So I thank you for the opportunity to tell you about the privilege of serving in the 4th Congressional District.
What are the 3 most important things you want to accomplish?
Well, you know what, when I'm asked what are the top 3 priorities, it's awfully hard to narrow it to 3, but I thought I will. I care desperately about healthcare, and here we are in the middle of a pandemic. Never did we think that healthcare would be such an important issue, but healthcare, access to healthcare for all is my #1 issue. The other issues that I care desperately about are good government. We know that we are challenged right now between ethics and integrity of our government leaders, some of whom are using their political power for their own personal gain. So good government is something I have cared about my entire life. And then the other third issue that I'll raise at this moment is gun violence. When our country suffers 50,000 deaths a year from gun violence, more than half of those to gun violence suicide, we must do something about it. And that's why I'm pleased to be a member of the Judiciary Committee where we are doing something about that.
The pandemic continues. Has our federal government responded appropriately? Should it do more? Explain.
I think, let me first lift up the good. I'm very proud to have been a part of a Congress that in a very bipartisan way recognized the extreme duress that our country was under for both our lives and our livelihoods. And we passed 4 bills in rapid fashion earlier this year in March and April in bipartisan form to get rescue resources to small businesses, to families, to individuals, to our local government, to healthcare, in order to have PPP and PPE, I should say. So in some ways, we've done some things very well, and I'm proud that it was bipartisan. I do believe we lack leadership at the very top. Unfortunately, this president lied to us. He knew the deadly nature of this coronavirus, this novel virus, and he hid it from the American public, lied about it, and refused to guide us to say, please, use these simple items to protect yourself and your family. Wear a mask, wash your hands, socially distance, until we can get a vaccine and therapies to take care of this virus. Now we struggle with 200,000 dead. So I see in part government has done well. There's more we must do. And our leadership at the top, sadly, has been rudderless.
African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. What do you see as the explanation for this disparity, and what remedies would you propose?
Well, sadly, those disparities existed before the pandemic, and the pandemic only shined a brighter light on it. And I have important communities in the 4th Congressional District that are struggling with this pandemic. Some of the underlying causes are underlying health conditions and access or non-access to healthcare, educational opportunities in terms of language barriers, making sure folks know that the testing is available, that the CARES Act makes that testing free to them. There are so many reasons. Certainly some of it has to do with economics and poverty. Those who are in tighter quarters are having a very hard time isolating and protecting themselves. So there are layers and layers of issues. These things have been true pre-pandemic, and sadly the pandemic has only shown a brighter light on those disparities.
Is our health system as a whole working well, or does it need change? And if you feel it needs change, would you advocate minor changes or major changes?
I would advocate building on what we have with the Affordable Care Act, but expanding it so that everyone has health care. There should be no one without access to affordable health care or health coverage for themselves and for their children. Sadly, we have a president who has been in court for his entire administration hoping to tear down the Affordable Care Act. I hope that voters this year will recognize that what we need to do is build on the Affordable Care Act and make sure everyone has access to to healthcare in an equitable way to get at some of those disparities you just talked about. That issue will be before the Supreme Court this November. It couldn't be more critical or more important. There's lots we must do. The Affordable Care Act was a big good step. Governor Wolf opting into Medicaid expansion got Pennsylvanians, more than 1 million Pennsylvanians, health care, mental health care, care for addiction and substance abuse. We need to build on that and do more.
A two-part question. Do you support allowing Medicare to negotiate prices directly with drug manufacturers? And what's your plan for lowering prescription drug prices?
Well, number one, yes, I do support that, and we passed legislation to do just that. Lots of legislation that we have passed in this 116th Congress sadly sits dormant in the Senate. We'll have to renew our efforts next year. What we can do is increase competition where it is appropriate. We can insist upon the negotiation of drug pricing. We can get our seniors greater coverage for their prescription costs to reduce their out-of-pocket costs so they're not choosing between utility bills or prescription drug prices. The Democrats in our caucus have passed important legislation to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We'll continue to fight for that this Congress, and I hope in the new one.
What should be done to prevent evictions and address homelessness during this pandemic?
Thank you for asking about that. I sit on the Financial Services Committee, so we're looking at that issue very extensively. Something that we passed in the HEROES Act, which sadly has not seen the light of day, frankly, from the Senate. We passed that bill on the 15th in order to identify resources to get directly to frontline folks. In the HEROES Act, we had $100 million for rental assistance because we are facing the threat of millions of families being evicted. And the problem is on two sides. It is both for the tenant and for the landlord. So while moratoria on evictions is a good idea to protect families and keep them housed, the landlord needs relief too. What the $100 billion would do would be to get the landlord payment so that that family can stay in their house, and the federal government would support the protection of that family as well as the protection of the landlord. It's a really important matter as we go into the fall and as we go into the winter. We cannot have mass evictions. Think of how much harder this pandemic and this economic collapse will be on all of us if we see that in our communities.
Do you favor any changes to Social Security, either the benefits or how we fund it? And explain, please.
Thank you for asking me that, and it's timely. You saw that recently the president suggested a moratorium on the collection of the Social Security tax for some businesses. And it makes no sense to do that. What I support is making sure we fully fund Social Security so that we live up to the promise of those who have paid into this system for their entire careers. We cannot let it run short. I believe in a new Congress, we will take a look at ways to modify Social Security to make sure it is stable and secure and reliable for our seniors as they call upon its use, because after all, they paid into it.
Should the federal minimum wage be increased, and why or why not, and how much?
I have supported legislation both at the state level and at the federal level to increase the federal minimum wage to a minimum of $15 an hour. That can be phased in or it can be done more quickly, more rapidly. We know that we do not have a living wage in our federal minimum wage now. Families have to cobble together 2 and 3 jobs in order to sustain a family. When you take a look at housing expenses, particularly in our 4th congressional district, and wages at the federal minimum wage at $7.25, it's woefully inadequate and hasn't been raised in many years. It's actually a poverty wage. So I believe that we must modernize, support working families, and increase the minimum wage to a minimum of $15 an hour.
The Equal Pay Act was passed in 1963, yet there remains a wage gap between males and females and between majority and minority populations. Does more need to be done? Explain.
Absolutely. And weren't we reminded of that so beautifully on the sad death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just last week? I think back on her model of public service. It was she who wrote the dissenting opinion in the Lilly Ledbetter case. The majority court shut her out and refused and denied her award of lost wages as a result of her work over years when she was paid less than the men doing the exact same managerial job that she did. What did Ruth Bader Ginsburg do? She not only wrote a beautiful dissent, she chose to read it aloud, which is not common in the Supreme Court. It elevates the voice of that dissent. And what she did was to say, well, the court was indifferent to the loss, the economic loss of this woman, which represents many other women in our society, and it is systemic. Congress must act. So in her dissenting, powerful voice, she got that to happen. And the Lilly Ledbetter Act was the first act passed by President Obama. There's much more we can do. The Financial Services Committee looks at those irregularities and inequalities through our lens. We'll continue to do more because we know women are still paid fewer cents on the dollar to their male counterparts. Women of color, even less.
What federal policies will you pursue to provide equity and opportunity for all Americans, including the many groups that have been historically disadvantaged?
Well, I hope that's actually at the core of my public service. Something I have cared about all my adult life has been educational opportunity. I think that if we focus on education and get that right for all, we will even the playing field. It will create economic opportunity. It will create job opportunity. It'll create greater justice and equality. So the number one thing I think we can do to lift all is to make sure that people have access to an equal, excellent education. Everyone should have that. Our Pennsylvania Constitution, by the way, says that people have a right to a thorough and efficient education. We're not distributing that education equitably as far as I can see it, nor are we putting enough resources toward that. So I think education is absolutely central to equality and to opportunity and to raising the lives and livelihoods of those who are marginalized. That's what I hope to do in all of my work.
Thank you. I've noticed that we have 10 minutes left and at least 12 questions. So we're
going to
we're going to ask you to be a bit more succinct, and maybe we can do these in 45 seconds so we can get through all the questions. How do we avoid tariff wars and open new markets for American businesses and farmers?
I think what we do is have smart tariff policy. When we saw in this administration erratic placement of tariffs as a punishment here or a punishment there, it actually wound up being a punishment on American companies. What companies need is predictability. They need to know that their vendor supply is coming to them in a predictable way at a predictable cost. We can actually be smarter with tariffs, and we could encourage more assembly and manufacture right here in Berks County and Montgomery County if we were smarter with tariffs. If we stopped the tariffs on parts and also increase the tariffs on full products, the big box products like an air conditioner or a bicycle. What you can do is actually reduce tariff on the parts, bring those parts here and encourage assembly and good paying jobs right here for assembly of a final product. You do that through smart tariffs, not through punishment, and not through erratic placement of tariff policy.
What is your plan to upgrade and maintain infrastructure, and how would you fund it?
Thank you for the question. I'm very excited to tell you we did pass H.R. 2, one of our flagship bills, which is a really robust infrastructure package that looks for a green economy, that looks for innovation for our roads, our bridges, our waterways, for clean water, which is very important in our district. It also is for the expansion of broadband, so everyone has equal access to broadband. And there are multiple ways to fund it. I was honored to be a part of the Pennsylvania House in 2013 when we passed a transportation package, and it had some increases of fees, some increases or lifting of the gas tax lid. There are multiple ways that we can fund it in a sustained way, and I hope in the new Congress we'll do just that.
The U.S. Voting Rights Act of 1965 allowed the Justice Department to review proposed state laws to assure no citizen would be deprived of their vote. Significant portions have been dismantled or expired and not reinstated. Would you reinstate the 1965 Voting Rights Act?
I sure would, and we would name it for Congressman John Lewis. I absolutely would. I had the pleasure of traveling twice with Congressman Lewis to Selma, Alabama, and to talk about equal rights and voting rights. And as you point out in the Shelby decision, again, a dissent by Justice Ginsburg, those protections have been undone in many ways. Voting rights are not equal right now in this country. We need to protect them. I would pass that bill.
Videos of police brutality have brought racism to the forefront of discussions. What role can federal law play to end police brutality and racism?
Well, we do have an important role to play. I was very proud of our Congress for rapidly, after the gruesome murder of George Floyd, bringing before my committee, the Judiciary Committee, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill, a package of bills that have been introduced separately year after year after year. That bill is important. It passed not only out of committee, but it passed the House, and the Senate has chosen to do nothing about it. Simple things that it would do: it would outlaw lynching. Can you imagine? We have not yet done that federally. It would ban the chokehold. It would keep a registry of bad actors, among many other important provisions. So we will reintroduce that bill if the Senate fails to take it up in this remaining days of our Congress, and we will get greater justice in our policing system.
In your opinion, what are the causes of gun violence in our country, and what is the role of federal legislation?
Well, Judith, this is something I've cared about my entire adult life. I think there are several reasons why we have such gun violence, and we've seen, sadly, a spike over the course of this summer during this pandemic in the Philadelphia region and beyond. Some of the causes are economic, I'm certain. Lack of opportunity, a failure of education for many of our young people leads to desperation and a lack of hope. We also should just pass a very basic universal background check bill, which we did in February of 19, first time in more than 20 years. We passed it in the House, and again, it sits dead in the Senate. There's a flood of illegal guns. We should pass lost and stolen legislation. There's so much we can do to save lives that I'll continue to be a part of that fight, because 95% of Americans want us to do something about gun violence, gun owners and non-gun owners alike.
Okay. Agriculture accounts for about half of Berks County's economy. Our local farmers are adapting as much as possible to changes in the climate. Should the federal government address climate change to protect our agriculture?
We absolutely must. Climate change is real, and it is not to be denied. It is an existential threat, certainly to our farmers, but to all of our families. And so what we have a responsibility to do is, for example, in that transportation package, make sure that that which we change in our infrastructure is sustainable and accompanies the good work that our farmers do for us. They are the bedrock of our communities. And so government has a role to play to make sure that we are tamping down on global warming, that we are walking away or working our way away from the overuse of fossil fuels, that we are protecting our planet. After all, Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, Section 27 says, we the people have a right to clean air, clean water, and the preservation of our natural aesthetic. That inures to the benefit of our farmers as well.
Okay, we're going to go to 30 seconds on the answers. I hate to cut you that short, but it's the only way we'll finish within our time limit. What, if any, steps should our nation take to reform current immigration policies?
Number one, we should recognize the inhumanity of this administration's policies. I don't know if you can even call them that. When we are caging children, separating children from their parents, putting people in jail cells. I'm going to be traveling this week to Georgia to take a look at what appears to be allegations of forced hysterectomy of immigrants. That's number one. We have to stop the inhumanity. And the other is we have to create a path to citizenship for the valuable members of our society. I see my time is up. I'm trying, Judith.
I know, and it's very hard. The ideas are complex. People rely on the U.S. Postal Service. Do you think it should function on a strictly business model or as a public service?
I think it's actually something of both, but it should not be judged as a business model. It is one of the most important and relied upon services and has been since before our country was formed. It is enshrined in our Constitution. And this false notion of let's take a look at it as a business enterprise and its profitability, especially when it's been handicapped by the pension requirement, the funding of the pension requirement. So the Postal Service is integral. It is service. It is not a for-profit business.
We have increased our deficit due to the pandemic. How do you suggest we dig ourselves out of this hole?
I think we have to do two things. Number one, wrap our arms around our problem, which is coronavirus. Act responsibly, work with the scientists, do what has to be done in terms of wearing masks, washing our hands, social distancing. Number two, government has a role to play to make sure that we get to a vaccine. So as soon as we get to a vaccine, we'll be able to more robustly open our economy. And once we reopen our economy, and as we are protecting and trying to save businesses, we'll be able to dig our way back out.
We do have about 20 seconds left. Would you like to make a closing statement?
Well, yes, thank you. It is an honor and a privilege of a lifetime to represent the 4th Congressional District, the place that I have spent the vast majority of my life, where I've raised my children, Montgomery and Berks counties. I will say that I think at this time we have unfinished business, and I'd like to be a part of that unfinished business, whether it was Congressman Lewis's or Justice Ginsburg, to form a more perfect union, to give opportunity to all, to protect my constituents and give them the opportunity they need. It's an absolute privilege of a lifetime to serve the 4th Congressional District.
Thank you, Mrs. Dean. And thank you for watching Candidates Up Front.
Thank you, Judith.
We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.